Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Practice Forward podcast. I'm your host, Owen Bush, and today we're joined by Jeannie Bertilanchini. Is that correct?
Yes.
Nice to see you, Jeannie. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you today. Jeannie has a Bakersfield, California practice that's keeping document quality high, navigating DSA, and still showing up locally. She brings complex work while mentoring the next generation and pushing for clear, single source of truth coordination. So if you've ever watched Plan Check, Stretch Deadlines, or Inherited Drawings You Couldn't Trust, this one's on you. So Jeannie Bertilanchini is the principal at Ordiz Melby Architects. It's a Kern County practice. Their stated mission is to enrich communities through collaborative design, innovation, and lasting relationships. So her portfolio spans education, healthcare, and commercial work. Right now, she's helping shape KCSOS's Bell Tower Plaza renovation, which is preserving heritage while upgrading systems and AV. And then inside the firm, she leads complex studio work and community engagement, from women in STEM outreach to AIA leadership. So, wow, that's a lot going on, Jeannie. Today, we dig into the business of practice in a regional market, how to maintain document quality under DSA, and where ground truth capture actually changes decisions and not just drawings. Jeannie, welcome so much to Practice Forward. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. A lot to learn from you. So you've been how long you've been running this firm for? How long?
7 years now. So I was project leader here and got my license while I was here and became an associate. And then the owners decided they wanted to look towards retirement someday. And so they started a leadership program, and I got promoted and started buying shares from that program.
Wow.
Yeah, sort of being at the right place at the right time, I think. But, that's what hard work pays off, right? You show them what you're capable of and that you're invested, and the owner saw it and approached me, and it's been good since.
Wow. So let's so you're in California market, which I'm starting to learn a little more about. So and market keeps changing, I imagine. What's some of the things that have happened like over the past year that you think have impacted the market you're working in?
We've been pretty good. I'm sort of considered Central Valley, so we're not LA, we're not San Francisco, and always keeping up on the billings index for AIA, and you can see that nationwide, billings are down, sales are down, and we've been pretty lucky over the past few years that we've been pretty steady. I'd say probably mid this year, we've noticed a little slowdown. So about 70% of my work is education. So anything from kindergarten through university work. And then the commercial and healthcare kind of slowed down after the pandemic, which surprised me. I think they were sort of maybe trying to figure out where to go next. But then we picked up in affordable housing, and that's been really big here in California. So that's been a good addition to our resume.
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of using some of the principles that you guys have been learning in healthcare and K through 12 as well, right? And what you're now doing in the affordable housing sector. So it looks like you've been diversifying a lot into this new affordable low-income housing, and now you've kept the team really BIM first, right? And you're an ArchiCAD company, which is interesting. It's I actually have a number of partners that are ArchiCAD based, and I find them to be really great designers, actually, and they seem to really prioritize ArchiCAD because they're prioritizing design.
Yeah, we started ArchiCAD about 18 years ago. We
Mhm.
were a data CAD firm, and I actually, my entire background was AutoCAD. So when I came to work here, I was a bit nervous because I knew that they were starting with ArchiCAD. I'm like, I don't even know how to draw a line, my first day of work, but picked it up pretty quick, and obviously that's all we've done. We did that transition from data CAD, which is just 2D lines, to actually building the model in the computer. And I think I want to say the hardest thing, but it's not really even that hard, is hiring. We don't typically find people out there that have ArchiCAD experience. Most of the
Yeah.
students come with Revit experience. If we're looking at experienced licensed architects, they have something else. A lot of times it's AutoCAD, but the students that we bring on, we've developed a really good training program, like a 2-week training course, and all of them that have had that Revit experience, they come in and they like, I love ArchiCAD so much better. And it's like everything's in one place. We've heard with other programs that you have to use a little bit of SketchUp and a little bit of their drafting program to kind of make get through the schematics and get to construction documents. But ArchiCAD has everything. We can do renderings in there. We've over the past few years started using Twinmotion to kind of get a little bit better entourage, cars and trees and people, that kind of thing. But our model is the same model from schematics all the way through, and then we keep that model live all the way through construction, and it becomes our record drawing set as we go through construction.
Right.
But I did want to say, like, ArchiCAD, I feel like I'm a big part of a family with them. I was an Autodesk user for a lot of years, and I didn't know anybody from Autodesk and ArchiCAD. They just really make you feel like you're part of them. I just came from Budapest about a month ago to go to a conference for ArchiCAD out there in Hungary. So it's really neat to be part of that and feel like your voice is heard with the software company.
Oh, great. Well, maybe you can help us get to know the community a little more, because I think we're one of the only scan to BIM providers that offers native ArchiCAD modeling. So it's good to, I mean, as you know, it's really different. You can't, it's difficult to convert a Revit model into ArchiCAD unless you really kind of build it from the ground up. So we have a number of frequent flyers with us, so we're keeping a number of ArchiCAD modelers going all the time. So we like to get to know this community more.
Yeah, that'd be
so
great.
So I mean, now that so was there a point where you started really modeling end to end in terms of how you're working in the firm, like since you came in?
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much model everything. Not every project is a brand new construction. So especially when it's, a renovation or modernization of some sort, it's getting those existing drawings and getting those in the program. One of the hard things is, like, the young people, they love to model, right? That's a little bit more fun than dimensioning or, building keynote legends or something. And so sometimes it's sort of trying to relay, like, we only need to model what's necessarily part of the project, but we also do projects for, like, churches and, like, Boys and Girls Club who need to raise money. So then the renderings become very important. So then we're spending time modeling things that do just add value to a rendering and what it's going to look like, adding equipment or desks and chairs and furniture. Because that's how they're going to raise money to actually build the building. And even schools will use fly-throughs to present to their boards and help them get things approved and set timelines and expectations.
Right. Yeah. So you're doing a lot of, like, I guess some renderings and Twinmotion and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And there's lots of programs we're learning about, a number of other twin motion-esque softwares, and they all have their different things. But, some of the bigger issues that we have is we're an office of 32. And so making sure that, if one person starts a project, another person can pick it up and potentially finish it. So it's just not about what the software can do. It's how do you manage the seat to seat and changing out. Do you have to buy 32 licenses, or can you buy, 3 and share those out? So lots of educating when you're selecting that.
yeah. And so you kind of have established some like training programs, or you're developing those. You've got OMA University, and you also have this SAS sustainability committee that you're
Right.
leading. Is that correct? So what goes into how does that raise tell me the transition of getting people out of architecture school and then having to go through your own university after that.
Yeah, so the onboarding training, just getting them to understand what ArchiCAD can do and how they can begin in the project is that's not part of OMA University. That's just our onboarding ArchiCAD training. And so we have a timeline of 2 weeks, but some people get through it in a week and a half. It just depends on the learner, and it helps us know where they're at based on the questions that they ask. But at the end, we created a sample project, and they're reproducing that sample project, and then they're publishing it and creating PDFs so that they could go through those steps within ArchiCAD on how to do that. Our OMA University is something we started 2 years ago in the office every other Monday. Used to be every Monday, but we've leaned it out a little bit. But we cycle through different things. So week 1 is an Arc Lab, which I just did today, and it rotates through the studios. So my studio presented Arc Lab, and that's just really anything that's architectural education. Like I've done one on dimensioning, I've done one on the different types of doors and frames. So it's really to kind of help the younger people learn something before they, sometimes it takes us years to finally understand doors, and we're trying to educate them early before they touch on all things. But Arc Lab is 1 week, lessons learned is another week, where we're sharing maybe lessons learned that we could have done better on our documents, or the way we handled the situation in CA. And so sharing that throughout the studios has proved to be beneficial. And then show and tell, because we have 3 studios in the office, and sometimes one studio doesn't know what the other studio is doing. So it's sharing our work. And then the last one is,
how do you organize a lessons learned shared experience?
so we have a calendar for the year. And like I said, we've got 3 studios, studio A, B, and C. And so we just rotate it so that someone's not doing a presentation every other week. It ends up being every couple months. But the tips and tricks is the 4th one, and it's usually on our software. So we do an ArchiCAD tips and tricks of sharing. Sometimes it's Bluebeam, sharing with the office, different ways to do things. So it's calendared for the entire year. It's from 8:15 to 8:45 in the morning. So before people get too busy, and everybody in the office is back in our training room, and the presenters rotate. So it's not always me, it's not always the owners, it's different people in the office either doing their show and tell or lessons learned. But it's kind of been neat to get people to feel comfortable talking about maybe some mistakes that they made. It's like we need to be comfortable sharing that, so that the same mistake doesn't get made over and over. So we have one guy in charge of it. He calendars it out, and then he sends a week ahead of time whose presentation it is coming up, so that you're reminded you've got to put that together. And most of the time it's a PowerPoint, that we're presenting just to show some examples. Or today I did mine on just clarifying, don't say on your plan C electrical, because then you might go to the electrical plan and they say C architectural. So it's reminding them that if you're going to put C structural or C electrical, you need to go look at their drawings and make sure the answer can be found there, and there's no pointing fingers. So a lot of detailed questions that add value to the project and reduce change orders, or even RFIs. RFIs take a lot of time. So
Yeah,
being able to
right.
have a good, you're never going to have a perfect set of drawings. That's what we all aim for, but really just, trying to get through. And it's the young people, right? Teaching them to do it early. And then even the project architects need to know what they're reviewing and how to catch certain things. So
Yeah.
OMA University has been great.
Well, so, okay. So it sounds like you have like a lot of different ways for your team to take accountability for their work and to be able to share their own accountability. Right. And then, but then how, like, as an executive, like when you're reviewing the accountability of your own work, right, or of the firm's work, what kind of measurement tools do you use to like when you're working with districts or agencies? How are you able to do your own self-evaluation on behalf of the firm?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up often, like when we're interviewing for projects from the districts, because everybody wants that perfect set of plans. For our drafters, we have lots of checklists of what a schematic design set looks like.
Right.
We're working on trying to put a list of programming questions, like the things that I talked about, or just we have a break room. What kind of equipment needs to go in there? We want to make sure that your counter can fit a coffee maker, a microwave. It sounds pretty basic, but it's asking the questions. What kind of soap dispenser? Is it foam soap or liquid soap? Is your vendor going to provide that? So it's really asking a lot of questions throughout the process that gives the client and makes them go, okay, I don't have to worry because they're on top of everything. But then just like when we're about 80% through, we have some consultants that do our QA QC. So we'll bring them on just to do a review of the plan set, which is really good because it's somebody who hasn't been in the meetings, hasn't been looking at the drawings. They're sort of looking at it like a contractor would look at it. And so that's kind of what we're doing on one of our new schools right now, is picking up all those comments that are just improving the set before it goes into DSA for plan review. And then when I stamp drawings, I take time to look through them before I just put my stamp on them, because I usually am looking at different things than maybe the architect. A lot of times the architect is really down deep in the details, where I'm sort of at surface level. So sometimes I'll catch addresses being wrong, or, I'm just always catching different things. And so I make sure I go through it from the principal level. And then, of course, when we get back check items from either the city or DSA, it's another opportunity to keep going through it while you're waiting on those, to make sure that you're now slowed down and you're coordinating between consultants a second time. So it's just a lot of review, and that's why the teaching.
Think about it like the way we work, for example, we've got all these different checklists and layers of QC and QA as well, but there is that sort of thing where a lot of people are just in the weeds. They're like, well, I'm just following the point cloud. I'm just doing what the point cloud's telling me. But then there's another layer where you're just using common sense and you're looking at the thing more holistically and saying, if I were to just like look at these drawings, what would I see right off the bat?
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of different levels of perceiving something that might appear fairly simple, depending on, I guess, what level of framing you're looking at it from, right?
And we use Bluebeam as another way, as the PA's doing their red lines in Bluebeam. We have a process in which the drafter, as they're picking those up, they mark them checked. So Bluebeam will keep track of all the comments and who made them. And then when they've completed that, that's marked. So by the time they say they picked up the red lines, we should be able to look at that checklist and see that everything's been checked, or they could make comments as well in there. So Bluebeam really helps with the, picking up, you put all these red lines and then you got to make sure that they actually got completed. So.
Yeah.
And then you asked about SAS. So SAS committee, that's Sustainable Architecture Strategies. We started that committee in 2020 when we were all home during the pandemic and really just trying to we were working towards being able to make the AIA 2030 commitment, and we did that 2 years ago. And it's just tracking our projects and finding ways that we can do better. And really, it's also saving different ways that we can save our clients on their utility bills. Like maybe a piece of equipment might cost them a little more upfront, but if they're going to save this much over the next 20, 30 years, that's worth it. So
Sure.
we've used consultants and really just kind of tackling issue by issue. EV parking's a big one, right? Like, how do we calculate that? And does it need to be EV ready, or do they actually need to be installed? And so our SAS committee, which is 4 of us here in the office, we then do the research so that we can share it. And sometimes it's sharing it at our OMA University, so that everybody else can try to get on board. It's really hard when you think about something new. It's something new that we've added to our scope, and it's teaching everybody on staff. So I always envision it like back when ADA wasn't a thing, right? Everybody was just drawing bathrooms and stuff, and then all of a sudden they had all these clearances and stuff they had to be mindful of. And so it sort of feels like that you're adding another layer to what architects do. And the sustainability is really complicated, and it's re-educating. And I just sent 2 people to the Green Build conference 2 weeks ago in LA. We were lucky that it was in LA this year, but it's a nationwide conference, so it can be anywhere. So we took advantage of that. But again, just really trying to get as much education and then sharing it with staff and our clients. We're having to educate our clients, because, trying to understand what we want an all electric kitchen versus a gas kitchen. But then they're saying, oh, my chef, the guy that runs the kitchen will never go for that, so lots of educating.
Sure. Well, I think architects in general have a mandate to educate the world about sustainability in general and why it's important, because, I think architects are more aware, considering that, construction architecture industry is, I think 40% of the waste on the planet and 40% of the greenhouse gases. So I think, architects in general seem to take this a lot more seriously than most other trades who have really, they feel as if their life has no real major impact on the environment. So let's talk about some examples here. Bell Tower Plaza. Let's talk about Bell Tower Plaza.
Yeah.
This was a renovation that had of existing building where I guess a lot of situations that we work on, for example, where you're inheriting a number of conflicting as-builts and you're trying to find a single source of truth for the project. So, well, let's just start in general about like any project you work on. So like, what is your like basic minimum package that you'll want to have in terms of an existing building? Like, do you need to have the floor heights, or do you need to have MEP documented, egress, the envelope? What do you want to have in that documentation set before you start to do something new,
Everything you said, when I get a call to renovate a building or do something, the first thing I ask is, do you have existing drawings? Because that makes things easier for me. But that's the first thing my consultants, my engineers are going to ask me when I ask them for a proposal. They're going to like, do we have drawings of the mechanical system? Because you can't see all of that. I can go in and measure walls, but I don't really know what's happening up in the above the T-bar or something like that. So, and they need to know how much work are they going to have to do to go and figure that out. Even if it's just changing a room's use could change the amount of air that needs to go into that space. And so, of course, electrical panels, you can visually see lighting and outlets, but to know where is all that being served from, is there enough room to add additional power? So That's all real important. So we usually like to start with, an existing plan, because then you're starting to demo, right? So if you've got a space and you're removing walls, you need to still start with that existing plan so you can show the walls that you're removing. We did a rebranding of Kaiser Permanente to their medical office buildings here in town, and it was more cosmetic, changing the branding and changing the check-in process and signage and such. And so we used a Matterport scan, and it's more visual. It was a place to go when we couldn't recall what was on a wall. We could go to that and look at. That was so helpful, because otherwise it would have been going and taking a picture of every wall and sorting that out. So that was useful, but we didn't use it to create our drawings. We'd already had drawings of their facilities. So that was a specific use for a specific project, that we can go there anytime, and it's the whole building that's been, I'm saying scanned, but it's more photography, right? I can walk through the building and see if
Right.
there's a fire alarm on the wall.
Right.
So
But you didn't have resources like this for the Bell Tower Plaza project, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That Kaiser project was first, and then when we started the Bell Tower project, of course, we went in there and they had some drawings, but it was a church that was built in the 1930s, and then there was an addition a number of years later, and then it was no longer a church for a lot of years. And they had a bar inside where the sanctuary used to be. There was a full-on kitchen, and so there were a lot of like attorneys' offices and different kinds of TIs that had happened over the years. So it was a lot of information trying to pull it together. And I kept saying, like, we really, at a minimum, should have gotten it scanned just so we could visually see things. Luckily, it's here in Bakersfield, and so we did a lot of running back and forth, spent a lot of time organizing our photos, but I really should have gotten it scanned early on, because that would have been helpful just on the visual side. But I'm a little more savvy now and realize that you can get, like you do, scans that can then create our background, existing plan, and maybe even provide some information for my engineers. But so that one, we did it the hard way, and it was I'm going to use the excuse that the time frame was very short. We needed to hurry up and get moving, but I think scanning it would have saved us time, in the end. So, but that project's under construction, and lots of surprises, lots of things that we weren't aware of. But luckily, it's a project that wasn't on a real tight budget. It was KCSOS is our Kern County Superintendent of Schools. They bought the building, and now it's going to be all conference room spaces. So the kitchen is being remodeled. There was a lot of asbestos, so lots of work, lots of construction, RFIs and change orders and such, unfortunately. But that was expected with such an old project that had lots of concrete walls that make everything harder to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, as someone that you understands the entire spectrum of the life cycle of a building and your responsibility from beginning to end, it's, sometimes I feel like for my company, I feel like I should be talking to the CFO rather than the project manager, because it's really, like you say, now in the construction project where the RFIs come back and bite you and stuff, that you realize that the documentation at the start of the project is really so critical, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about whether or not it's cheaper than sending people to, draw it by hand. It's about what does that result in a year later or 2 years later when the thing's under construction? How many hours of coordination meetings are you going to be sitting through, and all that?
Yeah.
But I see that, obviously you guys have a very strong feedback loop in your company in terms of, making sure these kind of things don't happen in the future. So that seems pretty strong, as you outlined earlier.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Bakersfield College Campus Center project. So in this case, it was an addition, but it was also sort of an adaptive reuse of the existing structure. So you preserved and repurposed the food service building within the roof line. And then, so there you're saving money and you're reducing the embodied carbon of the project. And then you're adding a new 42,000 square foot structure. So how did you tell me about this and the verification process that you guys needed to go through before you undertook this whole process?
Yeah, so this was a unique project. It was a building that was done back in the early 1950s. It was a U-shaped building, and went through a lot of different scenarios, and they actually wanted to tear the whole thing down and
Right.
go back in with something else. And we convinced them to save half of it. So if it was a U shape, we got rid of half of it. The part that we kept was the kitchen. Their food service for students was split up into a couple different little areas that you'd have to go to one like food court, and I'm going to call it food court, to get certain things, and a different one to get others. And it wasn't laid out very well, and the flow wasn't that great. But we kept that building, demoed the other half of it. Where we demoed it, we did build a new 3-story building that had a service kitchen in it, because it had an event center up on the 3rd floor. But the part that we kept and renovated, it is an expensive thing to do, right? Because like that project, as they were digging, like saw cutting areas, they realized that there was big voids underneath the slab. And so we did end up having to replace a big part of the slab that wasn't anticipated, or areas where we were exposing concrete walls. When we did that, the concrete was falling. And so we had to kind of like clean that up. So things don't always look as good underneath that you think when you're in design. So there was definitely some lessons learned on that. But we're really proud of the fact that we were able to reduce carbon. That the whole outside of the building, we just did a little bit of furring and things to modernize the look of the building, and basically enlarge the kitchen footprint to double the size that it was. Very much needed. And then one large food court that has a pizza station, a hamburger station, a sandwich station, and proper cashier point of service lines where the lines don't get stacked up too bad, and then a proper dining room. So it came out really good. But when you renovate, because you don't always know what's there, I mean, there's things that are good for the environment, but there's also some unforeseens that that can be costly. And so as long as you're having those conversations while you're in design and everybody's fully aware and there's contingencies put in place at bid time, you can get through those without too much pain.
Right. So can you give me an example of like good documents that really accelerate the path in a project like this? And what like, I don't know, there could be checklists, clash snapshots, electronic plan review. Can you give me one metric, or how it saves time, how it accelerates the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody strives for that really good, thoughtful set of plans. I think using notes like by others, just depends, make sure that that's thoughtful, right? Like, just don't leave something sort of half designed, like really think it through. And to be honest, your best set of designs or best set of documents is a set where there were lots of conversation and collaboration with the owner, regardless of what it is. I mean, they don't know what you need to know. I've had some of my staff before say, well, they didn't ask for it, and it's like, well, but they're not the architect. We're the, you know, they have a real job, whatever their job is.
Yeah.
We're here, we're the architects with the knowledge and the education of what information the contractor will need to know. So it's having that list of questions that, do you want a TV mounted on the wall in your conference room? Like, because I need to put blocking in that wall and I need, power and data. We want to make sure everything's at the right height, not down 12 inches, then you've got cords running up, or you end up with a clock in the middle of a marker board, right? Because we called out a marker board, so things like that. It's like the BIM is very helpful if you're putting it in. We've not been real successful in finding electrical, mechanical, and structural that will actually do their work in BIM. We've had some projects where they've done it in Revit, and we've been able to bring in an IFC, which is really helpful. But electrical is one that it's hard to find that electrical engineer that does it. But we would love to have all the outlets, visible in our model, so that they're not landing, like I said, in the middle of a marker board or something like that, that the two things didn't get coordinated. But yeah, it's thoughtful questions, and really from our point of view, asking the questions, but then don't just leave it in your meeting notes. Make sure you go back and put that information into the documents.
So when you're let's say your model and the reality are disagreeing with each other, okay, in the construction phase, let's say, what do you do in your or even in the design phase when things are disagreeing? What's your rule for when you change versus when you make the design yield? Like, do you have a process for determining like how to address that? Because I would imagine it's always a crisis too, right?
Yeah. What we do is a modernization or renovation or addition. And those are harder because you're dealing with the existing conditions. We did have a project before where we were given the base, the existing CAD file, and as construction started, it was like a blowout of like 6 feet. I mean, that's huge, right? And we had all this furniture, and luckily COVID saved us, because it was during that COVID time and they realized they needed to have less cubicles in there anyway, so we were able to change. But, so my motto has been, regardless, you always go out and measure it, right? Verify those overall dimensions. I mean, it really is making sure that what you have on paper is what's out there, because I never want to experience that feeling again where it's that far off and you're trying to figure out, you used to have 6 people and now you can only be able to fit 4 desks, and like I said, we got lucky in the one, but that's not always going to happen, where the client is so easily ready to do that. So it's measuring, scanning, those are some real good ways to make sure that you don't have those blowouts. But getting out to the job site and just verifying things are some overalls are good practices.
Oh, well, this sounds like a great time for a mention from our sponsor, Scan2Plan. The Scan2Plan is the measure of excellence, and we have a scan to BIM workflow where we capture about 1/8 of an inch tolerance in the point cloud and about 1/2 of an inch tolerance in the measured model. As I mentioned, we're one of the only firms that will do scan to BIM and deliver in ArchiCAD. And we are tailored to your needs with a variety of standards and disciplines, depending on your project. And we're really ready when you are with national and international service, typically on site within a week and delivering within 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the project scope. And I would say for us, I think, as far as I know, we're the only scan to BIM firm that really defines, designates, and delivers both the level of accuracy and the level of detail in the project. It seems as if that's something that other people would like to leave sort of undefined. But we, just like you, we're really focused on, constant self-improvement and really developing our quality assurance, quality control, and our discipline for, delivering that consistently. So that's just a word from ScanDaPlan, the measure of excellence.
That's great.
So you've been leading publicly and locally, right? So you lead the AIA chapter, or you've had led the AIA chapter in your region, and you're also leading Women in STEM, and that's at the high school, right?
It's all grades. It's all grades.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just did partnered with superintendent of schools this weekend, conference called Ignite Her, and that was 5th through 8th graders to just introduce them to STEM careers. But we go and talk to girls of all ages.
Is there one practice habit you could identify that's helping women really thrive in architecture in the Central Valley?
The biggest thing right now is knowing that it's an option for them, right? Like I get parents that will call me or students that will come in and just showing them what we do, right? Understanding what an architectural office looks like. I never had met an architect when I was, in high school. I definitely never met a female architect. So it's really about showing them what's possible and, whether they're architects or we need more women in these STEM careers. But when it comes to architecture, there's 6 females here in Kern County. It's myself and 2 of them are here in my office. I have lots of females that are working towards licensure here in my office. And, it hasn't, you don't really have to treat the females differently than the males. It's like just understanding the difference in the way that we work and the way that we think and the value added. I think women think differently than men, and our needs are differently. And so bringing both men and women's ideas and input into projects is very important. So I think just letting them know that they're heard and, supporting them. And I think the reason why the numbers are so much lower with female architects is, we're the ones that, make babies, and we go off and into maternity leave, maybe about that time when normally you're starting to work through your license. But the numbers are growing. I believe we're about 28% of licensed architects out there. So happy to see it growing. In school, it's still 50-50. So it's just really supporting women. There's no timeline to get your license. So yeah, I mean, I love working with the ladies that I have. I probably have more ladies here than any other firm. I wouldn't say I'm 50-50. There's still more men, but I probably have a good 10 females here that all work together and work well with the men. That's another thing. It's like you definitely need to learn to work well with everybody.
Sure. Well, I mean, you've really emphasized to me that it's really all about relationships, community, and building trust and signaling reliability to your community and the districts, the county. I think that's something that men have a lot to learn from women about. In general, but I think getting into that, like, so you're representing your firm to a lot of these major stakeholders, and so what's a way that you you kind of signal that reliability to them? Like, what's something that they read as oh, well, we can really trust Jeannie.
Yeah, it's really integrity. It's doing what you say you're going to do, and then if something comes up, life always happens, and things come up, but then it's reconstituting that, like I know I told you I was going to have it on Friday, but today's Thursday, and I know I'm not going to be able to do that, but I will do what I can to get it to you by Monday. You know what I mean? It's just reconstituting that promise. And if you say you're going to do something, do it, to the best of your ability. And I think that that brings trust. I've had clients say, I want to use somebody else on this project because the past architect was never available and I couldn't reach them. Or, they said they'd be completed by a certain time and it was way longer. So, I've heard that the stakeholders complain about others. And so I definitely never want them to complain about me in that way. So just always showing up, and, everybody has to break a promise, but it's how you do that. If you said you were going to call them on Friday and it's Monday, they're sitting there going, where is that? They said they were going to have it to me on Friday. So it's letting them know, where you're at with it. I never want my client to say, I don't know, I haven't heard from them, I don't know where they're at, so keeping a schedule. We keep a schedule, and every time we meet, we update that schedule. So sometimes the stakeholders hold you up. And so reflecting that in your schedule, so you can say, look, we didn't hear from you for a month, so the schedule's 4 weeks behind, but we're going to do our best to try to make that up. And so it's having those conversations about whether I'm slowing down or they're slowing down the schedule, and showing them what that means on the schedule. So integrity and schedules, I think, are key.
Yeah. And over, I keep hearing in what you're saying, it's really just about communication and not holding back, not necessarily. Sometimes it's good to mirror somebody's communication style, but in other cases, it's not good at all because their communication style is not communicating enough.
Yeah.
And I think I would imagine it's probably one of the first things you have to teach people in the university as they come from school. That's my experience with most graduates, is that somehow they weren't taught to really communicate very much, or they by default, they're not actually saying all they should.
Or just picking up the phone, and a lot of them, they just want to email, and they think they've done their part when they email, and then 2 weeks later, they're like, I don't know, I emailed them. It's like, you might need to pick up the phone, because you can spend sometimes a half a day or a week going back and forth to clarify the question when it's a 3-minute phone call, if you just pick up on the phone. And I try to convince them that, it's hard to build relationships just through email. Relationships are another part that's key. Like every time I meet with you in person, or every time I pick up the phone, I'm building that relationship. You have a moment to say, how are you doing? Whereas email makes it kind of hard. So relationships are a real important part of what we do.
Yeah. It's interesting how people seem to, I don't know. I think people used to go towards relationships with enthusiasm. And yet it seems like now in our culture, people just look for any reason to back away from developing relationships in some ways. It's like we've all become like tortoises or something. But I think it is sort of generational, because I think everything's gotten very text-based, and I don't know. So anyway, tell me about, let's just get back into, so it's interesting to me because I'm also always bringing on a lot of young people onto our team, and how you're bringing people in and what kind of training you give them for just rigor for looking at, what are they looking at here? They're looking at ADA and fire separation. How do you really get them to really look at documents differently from maybe how they were trained in college?
Yeah, aside from the OMA University, our the way our studios are set up, we all have licensed architects in the studios, and then we have project leaders and BIM techs. A new graduate would be like a BIM tech level, but they're set up with a mentor. They're kind of matched up. So like my studio has 3 licensed architects And then I've got about 7 non-licensed that are kind of working under those. So we're relying on our PAs, project architects, understand that we're relying on them to mentor them. And so part of what I've asked them to do is it's great to redline drawings, but if you just then give them the red lines and they're moving text and moving lines and editing things and they don't know why, they're not going to learn it, right? They're going to be making the same mistakes on the next job. So I've asked them to, once they're done redlining, especially if it's a lot of red lines, like nobody wants to get that right. You think you did really good, you turn in your drawing and then it comes back a bloody mess. And so it's when you start seeing that there's a lot, I've asked them to go sit down. Let's go back in the training room and let's sit down and let's review this so that they can understand why maybe the note needs to read differently. I really want the mentorship to happen, because otherwise they can change the line type to read fire rated wall, but they don't know why they're doing that. They need to understand why, and that's going to teach them. And the other part of it is, the younger staff, it's them taking care of their own career. So if the licensed architect explains that and they need to take notes for future, that will help them remember it. If they just don't really pay attention and they change it to satisfy the red line, it's like, well, you're not growing and you're not learning. So also trying to get the young people to take ownership of their career. And, like in 5 years or in 10 years, if you haven't grown any, is that my fault or is that your fault? You know what I mean? It's like, this is your career. It's your responsibility to grow it. I'm here to help you, but you need to ask me questions because I don't know what you don't know, so it's the mentorship, but it's both sides of that mentorship. It isn't one person's responsibility to teach you. You have to understand it, and don't walk away until you understand it, right? Like, don't say got it if you don't got it.
Yeah, no, I often have to ask people to repeat back what I just told them, because they tend to just say, they nod their head, and then I meet with them a week later and they don't recall anything that was said to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's say if, okay, well, I would just say, like, just getting back to communication general about documents and documentation, and across a number of different, right? So I'm sure you work with a whole number of different folks in construction and different specialists, consultants of different kinds and things. And so you need to, have clear documentation, communication, coordination across a lot of things, right? So for me, one of the things I've been trying to educate people about is what is level of detail, what is level of accuracy, why these things should be included in RFPs, right? So that people have a language that they can talk about in terms of properly documenting projects at the inset, so that any architect who's expected to pick up a set of existing conditions is really getting what they need from the beginning. And so that's been a process for me. Like, we have an article out that sort of has like copy and paste ready paragraphs that they can put in any RFP that's being issued, so that they can actually define what's needed in the documentation. So, I mean, what would some things, are there things like that for you in terms of like educating people about, what should be in the quality of the documents for your county, for example, so that just projects can happen more smoothly with fewer surprises?
Yeah, we're always sharing. So, our DSA projects are a whole separate, review process. And when someone goes to DSA to get their plans approved, anything that the reviewers may have said, this needs to be on your plans moving forward, we share that within the office so that it's not a comment on someone else's drawing. So always trying to share what new things. We just found out that they want to know on your hardware, your door schedule, which, because schools now require a lock on the inside if they have over a certain amount of students. And so noting that, so that's something new we need to add to our template so that everybody's not trying to figure that out. It's part of the template, and you can add yes or no, whether it's got the lock on the inside. You can get that from the door schedule, but DSA wants, I mean, from the hardware spec, but DSA wants to see it on our plans and in the schedule. So really,
just explain to our audience what DSA is. Sorry.
Oh, Division State Architect. It's the reviewing agency for school projects, anything from really from K-12, community college. They do a little bit of review on the university projects, but
yes. Okay.
Same as OSHPAD or HCI is for hospitals. They're very much the same, but obviously those are the most stringent types of buildings. In a disaster, a hospital needs to be standing, and the protection of a lot of students make those requirements a little bit more stringent, much more than like commercial buildings.
Sure.
But really sharing, the information that we get from those agencies throughout the office is real important. It saves time. If we don't get approved, there's time. The contractor may be ready to go and they're waiting on your approval, and you've got this back and forth. If the school needs to start construction at a certain time, because first day of school is first day of school. They don't wait for construction to finish. And so a lot of times you getting your plans reviewed can affect construction timelines tremendously. I'm trying to go back to what you actually asked about, the details of things. We're also always trying to have conversations with the local contractors and find out what works for them. We always dimensioned interior walls to the center line of the stud. And we asked, do you guys prefer that, or do you like the face of stud? Because if you're snapping in, lines for your tracks, is it easier? And we found out they do like face of stud. That may vary from area to area, but it, letting our documents, help the construction process. So, fractions, if you have two walls and you've got a 3/16 of an inch, or 5 foot and 3/16, it's like we're really trying to train staff. If it's new walls, move that, give them clean. No one's going to really measure that 3/16 of an inch, unless it's a clear dimension. But, so, aligning our drawings to how they work out in construction, little tweaks for us can save a lot of time.
Oh, wow. Well, hey, thank you so much, Jeannie. So I think this is really a clinic for me about document quality and community anchored practice, right? So,
yeah.
So tell me, where should our listeners follow your work?
Well, our website is a good place to go, ordizmelby.com. And then we do have LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So you're always posting on all three of those. Ordiz Melby Architects is how you can find us. I do a lot of my own posting, Jeannie B Architect on Instagram, but my full name on LinkedIn. So always sharing what we're doing and try to be mindful. I see a lot of people in the community and they're always commenting on, wow, you've been busy, or you've been doing this. So they always know what I'm doing based on my social media and website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Today's conversation with Jeannie, we talked about how BIM discipline and ground truth can move public sector project forwards faster and safer. So if you helped, please share it with a colleague and who's staring down a DSA submittal. So I'm Owen Bush, and we'll be back very soon with another episode of Practice Forward, Technology, Tools, and Ideas, Reshaping Architecture. Thank you so much, Jeannie. Great to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful day. Take care.
You too. All right. Bye-bye.